Well, welcome to the ATP project. You're with me, Matt, and Steve. And today we've got Liz Nierzwicki. Did I say that right? Did I just nail that without practicing?
You did not. It's Nierzwicki. Yeah, you did great.
Yeah, we should just end it now.
That was perfect.
I'm going to say something wrong now.
There you go.
So Liz is a good friend of ours that we met at Lake Tahoe the other year at one of our Spartan events. And Jeff was on a panel with Liz talking and Dr. Don, and it was actually one of my most favourite moments of the Lake Tahoe, that actual panel. I thought it was very powerful. Jeff can't be with us today because he's got to do adult sort of stuff, which I'm not needed in. So Jeff won't be here, which he's very disappointed, and he did want to say g'day. Lucky he popped his head in and said g'day. But today we're going to talk about a variety of things. I understand that you do the yoga, do the meditation. And you've written a book about the good habits, getting rid of bad habits to make good habits and that sort of stuff. And we're going to talk about that sort of thing today. I told you I did terrible intro, and someone is going to edit that out and do a much better one, I'm sure. But Liz, introduce yourself to our audience for any that don't already know you.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful to be here and just to be able to share my experiences with your audience. A little bit about me. I am a longtime single mom. My son's actually 17, so I got like another year.
That's what you think.
Yeah, exactly. I've loved it. I actually am super spiritual, really mainly because of my journey with my son. That's a podcast in and of itself, but I'm very spiritual, and I was pre-med in college, nutrition science, that's always been a love of mine, and psychology. But then I switched to the business school, and then I got a business degree. I worked in the corporate world for about 10 years before really following that calling on my heart to be an entrepreneur. And I started a yoga studio in northern Indiana, and that quickly became the #1 studio in northern Indiana. And I created a yoga school so that I could educate other people on, the path of yoga. And then I created an online fitness program called FigureFit. And that was different because I really felt pigeonholed with just yoga. But before yoga, I was a sprinter and I was a weightlifter. Wow. And I understood nutrition science, and I understood how to, weight train and lose body fat. But people in the yoga world weren't really into that very much. They were more, a lot of them were vegans or vegetarians, and they were just more into the yoga and not weightlifting. So I felt a little bit split in two. So I created the online business to really focus on the personal training aspect and the nutrition. And then I wrote a book. It's called Happy, Healthy, Fit.
Look at that.
And that was really just to talk about my journey in general. And started a podcast, and I've just been in this world, and this paleo world, this health and wellness field for a good decade.
Yeah.
And I love what I do.
And that's interesting that you said a lot of the yoga people, weren't into the weightlifting and the sprinting, but it's also the other way around. I think it was at the time there would have been very few people in the weightlifting and sprinting world considering the yoga. They would have been doing a certain amount of stretching, the dodgy groin stretching, you see people do. But my understanding with the sprinting and the weightlifting is that I thought they would have frowned upon such things as yoga that was just stretching out muscles, and is that would have been a challenge in itself, like trying to blend the two, and they're all kind of copying you now, I'm sure. But how did you do that right at the start? You would have had a lot of people saying you were wrong.
How did I keep them split, or how did I even get into yoga?
How did you merge? How did you go? How did you make that leap to go from the weightlifting and the sprinting and that sort of stuff into that meditative type of yoga, that go from fast and intensity and angst and aggression and into that mellow, stretching, slow thing?
Okay, I totally hear you, and that is such a good question. I'm going to be so honest with you. I had my yoga studio for a decade, and I have a yoga school, and I still have a hard time getting myself to do yoga.
Oh.
To literally do like a whole hour session.
Yeah.
What really led me to yoga was a visit to a friend out in Santa Monica. And he was going through a really hard time in his life at that point in time. And he was really into kind of like more self-soothing things. And I was more in that, chasing life kind of zone, that type A personality, and that go, go, go energy. And he wanted to go to a yoga class, and I was like, yoga? Like, really?
Yeah.
And he was like, I think you'll like it. The girl that's teaching, she studied psychology like you did in college. And she has a really good way of like bringing in a message to her class. So I was like, all right, I'll go. And we went, and it was actually so hard. And I had no idea that it would be as hard as it was. It was a different kind of hard, whereas weightlifting is like burning when you're lifting weights. And this was like burning for like a minute of holding a pose because you're stretching those muscles. And it was actually in a dark room. I remember that was candlelit. And she was a really good teacher. And her message was really about, like sticking with the hard things and seeing what you're made of, and also being compassionate and gentle with yourself. And I really liked the message. I don't think I would have gotten hooked, but we were walking down the road after the class was over, and we were walking back to get some like dinner or a smoothie somewhere. And I felt like I literally just felt light and airy. And I said to him, I said, man, I really feel like I'm floating in between my steps. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's called the yoga buzz. And I was like, well, what the heck is that? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, but it's really cool. And I was like, yeah. So I left LA, and I bought in the airport that day, I bought a yoga journal magazine. This is kind of funny. Oxygen magazine, and then an entrepreneur magazine. And this was like when I was still in the corporate world in my early days. And on that flight home, I was like, I'm going to become a yoga teacher. I'm going to do a fitness competition, and I'm going to start a business. So I had boom, boom, boom. Those are my three goals.
Like you didn't get a car racing
like
magazine.
Yeah, exactly.
NASCAR driver as well.
Yeah, that's what I did. I just was like, this is weird. It's different. I don't know what that was and why I felt so good. And I wanted to find out the science behind it.
Amazing.
I'm sorry. So I have so many questions about this because I've been a naturopath and everything, and meditation and spirituality and a very important part of the holistic prescription. But most of our training's in nutrition and herbal medicine, and then we kind of say and do the other stuff too, but don't really know how to train it. And I've tried to do lots of different bits and pieces. Now, I'm a real thinking guy. I keep thinking all the time. And so when I try to do these things, I never know if I'm someone will say, now go to that happy place. And, I never know if I'm imagining things or if I'm actually meditating. And I find that I get so caught up in my head that I don't find it relaxing. What I have to realize now is I don't think that's what I was supposed to be doing. I think a lot of the benefits of doing body work with these things is to be focusing on stop thinking and I now, if I focus on things like symmetry and I think about flow of movement and symmetry or something like that with my movements, as opposed to trying to get the most intense stretch or trying to be that hardest meditator that takes me to that cloud or something, so is that the key with a lot of these body works, Tai Chi, yogas, even certain training, is to just kind of get out of your head, and that's how you get into the meditation? Is that how it works?
Yeah, this is one of the topics that's really confusing for people. And I have a lot of, experience with meditation and also teaching it. Okay, there's a couple different ways to look at it. there is that mind-body connection that you feel the moment not really the moment, but a couple minutes into working out, for example. Let's say you go for a walk, your mind and body start to get in sync with each other. Whereas when you're just sitting, like your brain can go running, or if you're in the shower, your brain is just thought after thought after thought. Typically, when you get involved in any sort of activity, playing the piano, typing an email, you can get into a zone, and that's simply called concentration.
Yeah.
Now, there's different states of the brain. We have different brain waves. And when you start meditating, it's actually, you're going to be happy to know this, because this is what I wanted to talk about in terms of breaking bad habits. And it's like far down the road, but the brain has different modes, and you were born with a certain mode of an operating system that is a default brain state to you, and you can create the neurological connections of an alternative mind if you practice it, if you meditate, or if you are able to get into a focused concentration for a certain amount of time. So, for example, like a musician or a guitar player, they're definitely meditating when they're in that flow state. Okay, it's a different brain state. Whereas when you have all the thoughts, you're actually in the default brain, which is what you're born with, is what you evolve with, and it's the brain state that keeps you safe. It's really the brain state that keeps you alert and active, and really fighting for your survival. But that's also the problem with our default state, is because it literally looks for things to fix.
Yeah.
So what the yoga tradition has found is that state of brain is actually really problematic for us, because we can't just ever be happy when we're just sitting there. The brain goes to look for different things it can fix, or it time travels, or it will socially compare you to somebody else, and it starts to build up an identity, which is called the ego, that ego self. So that's the default brain. But if you actually meditate, you can build that alternate brain state. But the only way to do it is through trying it and doing it.
Okay.
That's the only way to build those neurological pathways in your brain. And once you do that, the gray matter of the brain gets bigger. And they've seen this on meditation scans of the brain, MRI scanning. And they've seen, a non-meditator brain and people who have meditated for long periods of time, their brains look different.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So we talk about, study and learning and behavior and those sort of patterns. And in the brain, this is mainly for the listeners to relate back to some of the things that we've talked about on other podcasts, is the brain builds these shortcuts. So basically things that are useful, things that are involved in survival, or things that we tend to do all the time as a default pathway. Our brain will create some neural shortcuts, so it's very easy to access. Very handy techniques if you want to study to pass an exam and that sort of stuff. You can learn how to bring certain information forward by practicing it, which is the study. What you're saying here is, when we're in this default pathway, this survival mechanism, our body is designed to create innate pathways which we can't afford to wait to see what the stress is before we react. And just in case we're getting attacked by a lion or something, it's the same mechanism. You put your hand on a hot plate, before you feel the heat, you've removed it. Our body has these innate defense mechanisms, and that revolves around gut instincts and long-term memory, and what did I do last time I was in this situation, and what is my gut telling me to do? And it changes a lot of these things. Now, because our body can't afford to wait to see what the stress trigger is, we might be suffering from inflammation or toxic exposure or injuries or, some other sort of inflammatory or immune trigger that keeps our survival nervous system thinking something's not quite right. We then look around our environment. Next thing you know, we're blaming things, and we're finding all of these things to think about, or if in the absence of things in our immediate environment, we're going back to long-term memories and gut instincts. What happened last time I felt this way? And you go back to previous traumas and things like that. So what we're learning through a lot of our podcasting with psychologists, people like yourself, the people like the Ken Wares and all these guys, they're basically all teaching us a very similar pattern that through repetition, through practice, we can create new neural networks that are more beneficial to us, which I'm assuming is what we're referring to with good habits. We can create new neural shortcuts to things that are beneficial, and in the absence of that void, we can push all the other bad habits away and change the neural networks. Is that kind of the goal here? Is that
here's what I learned a couple years ago with one of my friends who's he's a researcher on like quitting smoking and habits and changing habits. And what he told me, his name is Dan Party. I had him on my podcast, the FigureFit podcast, many, many years ago, but we talked about habits and the formation of habits. The problem with smoking, or the problem with any bad habit, like drinking or smoking or whatever the case may be, every time that you have engaged in that habit, you've created like I want to call it like a spark inside of your psyche and your neural pathways, that when you see that car again, that person again, that restaurant again, that wherever you were again, if you like smoking outside and it's, in the morning or it's dusk at night, like every single place you have done that, you have created a trigger. And so the hard part about quitting smoking is those triggers, because they're literally everywhere. And what people have to do is, recognize the trigger and then play it out. And a lot of the times, without self-awareness and without any sort of meditation training or real just self-awareness training, you don't even have awareness of the trigger. And you find yourself in the middle of the bad habit going, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
I had the intention to quit. How am I here? Like, what happened? And you have to like sit with it, and you have to map out what happened. You got to go back into it and, just kind of backstep your way through it and to figure out the trigger. And your trigger could have been you had a bad night's sleep. That could have been your trigger, and it just started you off, the day on the wrong foot. So that's really interesting
it's
about
amazing.
Bad habits.
Amazing. And in your book, you mentioned about being 90 days, and I love that term. You've given people timelines to change, because people say, oh, I'm working on it, or I want to change, or I'm going to change, or I have to change. And in your book, you talk about transforming lives within 90 days. I love that you give someone some finality. So do you want to talk about if you think it's important to put a timeline on a change maybe, or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's really important for most people. It's probably something that people don't think about enough in terms of putting themselves under a deadline and giving them something, basically like putting yourself on the line. Okay, here's the thing. When you're a kid, you have adults to hold you accountable. You have school teachers to hold you accountable. But when you become an adult, you don't have anyone holding you accountable other than you. So if you don't build that strong network within yourself of accountability towards goals or habits or your own personal standards, then you're not going to have any, So what I found when I started creating goals, when I did that fitness competition, this was I love creating goals. And this was the big one for me. I decided to become a yoga teacher and also do this fitness competition. I did them both within a single year. The fitness competition, I had a deadline. So I knew the day I was going to be on stage, and I was terrified to turn around and show my bum to the crowd. I was like, oh my God, I have to do that? And so I was like on a mad mission to work out and eat right, and I had a deadline. When that ended, I had nothing. I had no deadline. I didn't want to even do another fitness competition, because really that one was just for fun, just to see what it was all about. And they're expensive, and I was like, I'm just going to put that money back into my business rather than into that. So I didn't have a deadline anymore. And what I found was I was like a fish out of water. I had no real goal. I had no real aim. I could live that way. I could eat that way. I didn't have to work out the way that I was before, And so I found myself like a fish out of water, and I really learned we need goals. We need things to aim into and to work towards. And I believe that that's what really calls your best self forward.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Do you have is there any, because I was going to ask what sort of a time frame we need to like practice something to break a habit. Is there a time frame that you know of that, I know we've got a 90-day challenges and things like that, or that, but is there like a magic number or how, to create those new neural networks?
Yeah, well, there is. There's a lot of research that says, okay, in the past it was like 21 days to make or break a new habit. I believe it was a university out of Europe. I'm not exactly sure where, but they came up with 66 days or 61 days or something like that to actually create a new habit. The research for the brain, the meditation and the neural pathways of the brain, that showed that in 8 weeks, you can start to change your brain.
Yeah.
So let me talk about that real quick in terms of habits, because what a lot of people do with bad habits is, well, let me ask you this. What do you do when you mess up or you feel like you failed at something? Are you nice to yourself or do you kind of beat yourself up?
No, I'm a maniac. I really attack.
Yeah, I beat myself up.
I beat myself up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guilty of that.
Yeah.
So research has shown, and a lot of psychology research has shown that they took people, I think it was Stanford University, they took people and they looked at their brain. They hooked up all the monitors to the brain, and they asked them about times when they were mad at themselves or something that they felt they failed at. And the parts of the brain that lit up were the same parts of the brain that retreated in pain.
Oh, wow.
And stopped any sort of action.
Wow.
It was more of a retreat than a motivation to go and do.
Wow, that's amazing.
So what they found is that when you beat yourself up, you're literally like retreating. What do you do when you retreat? You typically want to escape, so then you go do those bad habits.
Yeah.
So it's this awful cycle that people get in because they're beating themselves up. So this was like this huge awakening for me when I read this book called The Neuroscience of Change. It's by Kelly McGonigal, and it talks a lot about this as well. But when you beat yourself up, you retreat, but then you want to escape. So maybe you're a shopaholic or you're a smoker or you eat food for comfort. You're doing that to escape the pain that you just caused on yourself.
Yeah,
So
wow.
the other way to take care of yourself during that time is to really have compassion and self-love and acceptance, and just remind yourself that you're a human and we're here to learn, and to really just have a conversation with yourself like you would have with a kid that's learning a new thing.
And that would be much the same with coaches or other people too, wouldn't it? So if someone gives that positive reinforcement versus attacking you for failure or like really,
right?
Because you see those different styles. You see some that'll really make them accountable. You got to be accountable for your actions, and I'm going to attack you every time you mess up. And then you've got the others that are they're based on love and support. So that would be a very similar effect to the brain, but probably even more powerful when you're doing it to yourself because it's a little bit more honest or something, or a little bit more internal.
Yeah, it just kind of keeps you frozen, and it keeps you in that cycle of, doing the same things over and over, because you shut yourself down you literally shut down the part of your brain that is motivated to take the action to change.
Incredible. I mean, in my clinic days, you'd see people who would say, how's your diet going? Oh, look, I had some chips, and I said, "Oh, well, what did you do?" "Oh, I ate more junk food because I was off the wagon." And it's sort of like, hang on, what? You have one mistake and you snowball to 10, and you hear that very often. And it can be, "Oh, I didn't go to the gym today, buggered, I won't go back," or it's all over the place. So what you're saying really resonates, because that's an incredible thing about a bad habit leads to another, or in your case, or not in your case, but in people's case where they smoke, they have one cigarette and that's it, they're hooked again. And so they don't give it up. So have you got any strategies of overcoming that for people? You talk about self-love. Is there anything else you can share with us about what you've found works to get people over those bad habits?
Yeah, I've got some steps in my book, but one of the things that just popped into my mind when you said that was, here's the process I have in my book. And it's step 1 is first, and I mentioned this before, is first you have to recognize the process that unfolded for you. So this is where self-awareness comes into play, because if when you're in that moment and I have struggled with binge eating, and I can tell you exactly what triggers me. But in the past, I didn't know. But I would sit in front of this cabinet and I would just get the chips out, and I would sit there because I didn't want to take it over to the couch, or I didn't want to take it somewhere else. I just sat in front of the cabinet because I was only going to have a few and then put it back. But I'd sit there and eat half the bag, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, in the moment, I was having my own inner conversation, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You need to stop doing this. And I was like, just one more, or I'll work it off tomorrow. And I would just have this inner dialogue. And so in that moment, sometimes people are aware enough, and they can see that process of, like, I call it the good angel and the bad devil on your shoulder, where you're literally like fighting yourself. Most people beat themselves up in that moment, but that's the moment where you have to choose compassion rather than anger. And for me, like I said earlier, I'm pretty spiritual, so I know that if I turn to, it's just a downhill spiral. But if I turn to compassion and self-love, I say, okay, Liz, why are you doing this? What's the problem? What are you running from? Put this away. This is gonna, like, I start to have this conversation with myself, like, this isn't good for your goals. You're going to have to run like 5 miles tomorrow, and you're not going to do that. So you need to put this away, So that's the first step, is really, but then backing up, like, why did it even happen? So typically you're running away from something, you're escaping something. For me in the past, it was, this is crazy because I'm such a go-getter and entrepreneur that most people would look at me and think she doesn't probably have a lot of fear. She's pretty confident. But when I was little, I was picked on so much by my older siblings. And so I was kind of told to be quiet. And, but there was that inner part of me that was like a firecracker that fought back for my voice to say things. And when I feel shut down, I retreat and I will eat food for comfort. And so when I got older as an adult and I was doing this all by myself, nobody was there attacking me or trying to shut me down. It was me doing it to me. And I realized that I have a goal. Typically it's me playing small. I like to say I'm not here to play small. It's me not believing in the vision that I have for something and not chasing that goal, and really stepping out of my comfort zone and doing the thing that I know I should be doing to move me forward. For some reason, I'm telling myself a story that it's not going to work, or nobody's going to like it, or, I'm telling myself something negative, and there's no reason for it. And really, I think it was a lot of just personal development work to really get myself there. But if you know what happened to you typically when you were younger, you can look at yourself and go, for me, like, I was picked on. I was the youngest. I was told to be quiet. I didn't really seem like my input was valued, so I fight that. And then it's when I see myself not showing up because I'm afraid that I retreat and I do those bad habits. But when I show up and I step out of my comfort zone and I do the things, it's like those things just fall away.
Yeah.
It's that success cycle of you do it, you have the idea, you show up, you do it, you get the feedback, but that feedback comes as confidence. So those things that were holding you down are no longer holding you down because you have the confidence because you're showing up for yourself. So it's both sides of it can be like the one side when you're not showing up, it can be really bad and a really bad cycle where you're just holding yourself back over and over and over. And I really believe that some people waste their whole life in that place. Whereas if you get to the other side and you're really showing up, it's another side of confidence and moving forward and achievement. And that success side just keeps rewarding you. So for me, that's what I've noticed with step one, recognize the process that unfolds. And number two was, what did that impulse feel like? What made you originally do it? And then what was the trigger is step number three. So I really kind of talked about that in terms of that story, but those are the three steps to take to really try and break down a habit, but bringing in that compassion, but also doing that work for yourself. Like, what are you running from?
Yeah.
What is it?
So it sounds hard. I mean, it really goes back to a lot of belief systems around and how we self-sabotage, fear of failures or whatever. We just create that same cycle over and over again. One thing I noticed in my naturopath experience is I used to, in the initial consultation and in the forms, I used to ask why they're there and who sent them. Unless they were there for themselves and unless they asked for help, it just did not work. If they were there because someone else told them they need to break the habit, if someone else recommended they came to see me, or someone, usually, the chief medical officer of every household, which was the mums, would insist that they were there or something, and they didn't want to be, until they wanted to be there and until they asked for help and until they took ownership of the thing, there's no results. You could not get the results. Now, what you're saying, it all starts to make sense because it doesn't really matter what we say from the outside in. It's that internal self-talk that creates those cycles and self-perpetuates those belief systems that leaves you there sabotaging any change because it just wants to keep you in that thing. Another aspect of it, again, which I keep going back to, the holistic approach with these things is, while we're in those survival mechanisms, once you've been attacking yourself, you also get those defensive postures, and you can actually start holding around a bad physical posture or something like that that can also keep you in that defensive frame of mind, just because the way the traps might lock in, your shoulders might come forward to protect your heart, you might shut yourself down, and even in that posture and in certain positions on the couch or something like that, those physical symptoms might actually trigger those same bad habits. So I think that's where it's important not only to have that self-talk, but also to have other good habits that revolve around getting your body back out of that, whether it's through meditation, yoga, training, whatever it is. But obviously not reinforcing self-hate and not reinforcing angst and aggression and survival. You don't want to be manifesting more survival and self-hate sort of belief systems while you're actually exercising. It should be exact opposite. It should be back to that love and that you're training not because you ate that thing, but I'm training because my body feels better for it and that sort of stuff. So that'd have to be a very important part. I don't think one would work without the other, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have this fear of really claiming I love myself, because you might seem arrogant or cocky if you like yourself too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know for me, I for sure have, and so much so that I haven't even spoken about self-love as much as I probably should have. And I look at other people out there who are just, they build a business around self-love, and I'm like, yes, good for you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I just think that some people, may not really feel that comfortable to do that, but man, it's our right. I think we need to. I really think that so much of the world would be healed if people really understood how valuable they were, and that they should love themselves. It's really a domino to so much more.
Well, especially, I mean, like all these people in the world and everything. I mean, you are you. I mean, if you don't love you and you don't think you're valuable, then I mean that's pretty crappy.
Amazing.
I mean, it's pretty hard to motivate yourself to do something awesome with your days and that sort of stuff. I mean, what would be the point of being here if you don't think you should be here? Like, it's got to. I think sometimes we've got to go back and go, man, there's a reason I'm here. Like, it's a miracle that I'm here. So let's kind of appreciate that and celebrate that instead of throwing it back into the face of the universe or whatever creation belief you have. You know.
Amazing.
Almost got caught into
Can
religion.
you imagine if like that was more of our modus operando? If that was like more of how we lived, we woke up every day really believing in that we're here to be great and to do great things and to help other people do great things. Like, okay.
Nice, huh?
So on that note, the default brain, the part of your brain that is just normal, is the part of the brain that looks for things that are wrong. It's just natural. But that's not good. And the world that we're in right now, like, look what's going on. You see people screaming in the streets about all the things that are wrong. And if you know anything about creation, you're speaking that stuff into existence. Even if you don't want it to continue, if it's happened in the past and you don't want it to continue, you're keeping yourself in that energy and you're speaking life into it. And it's just, you're creating that cycle over and over and over again. And the only way to really get out of that brain state, there's 4 of them. One of them is complaining. That is one of the things. So you can do a test on yourself when you're walking or when you're in the shower. Just start noticing the stories that your mind tells you and the things it starts to typically go to, because chances are it's the same things. You know, it could be, I can't believe that person did that. And you've got this running story of that same thing over and over again for years. It could be something else about yourself, but typically there's 4 things your brain is doing. 1, complaining. 2, time traveling, going to a past situation or to a future imagined scenario. The 3rd thing is it's socially comparing you, that sense of self, to other people or other people to other people. And this is why they do that. And then the 4th one is build up that sense of self. And that is the identity that is being created as one of those 4 things, because you'll end up saying, I'm not the kind of person who does this, but that's a good thing in a way, because it gives you an identity and it gives you standards. But when you think you're so different from everybody else, you're not. You're not. I mean, that's the story that's being spoken right now. We're not. We're humans. Okay. And like, when you think you're so different from other people, that actually, in your own state of being, your own psyche, that creates a wall, because it anchors you into an identity that you think you're stuck with, but you're not. And you can change.
Absolutely.
Isn't that wild?
It is amazing.
Wild.
And I want to ask you about change and about your personal story, if you don't mind. It's about the fact that, you know, when I was looking you up online, you know, doing this interview, I noticed you do speaking, you write books. As you mentioned, you're a single parent. You've got all these other things going in your life that's just amazing. How do you... And what advice to give to people who have lots in their life, who haven't got time to build their own self-worth, their own self-health, and become, as you say in your book, happy, healthy and fit? What would you advise people who are busy and too busy for any of that stuff?
You have to make time. I understand busy so much. I do it to myself.
Yes, I noticed.
I have had to, and that has hurt me in some scenarios of doing too much. I've had to back off of certain things. And to go way back to your first question, how did I even start yoga? It was almost forced upon me because I think I was 32. I got shingles, and that was from stress. And that was like right up here in my temple, and it hurt so bad. And I was working out, I was working, and I was, you know, single mom. but the stress levels were so high. I needed more than what I was already doing. And I was like, how? The only other thing that I could possibly have added was yoga and meditation. That was it, because I was already running and working out so much. So you have to create the time for self-love and your own self-care. And you really got to find what you like to do. I think that above signing up for, let's say, my program or any other program out there, you can sign up. But if you don't like weight training, you're not going to do it. Like, you got to find things that you like to do and do those things. And yeah, you do got to do things that are tough, that are going to, make you uncomfortable, but change you. For example, today I was doing split lunges and I hate them, but I like the way they take care of the backside, so it's like, sometimes you got to do tough things to get the good results.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have always done is schedule. I live by a schedule. I time block now more than I ever have, because my life is even busier now than before. So I time block, and I actually now give myself a lot more grace and compassion than I ever used to. And the reason I did that is because not giving me grace and compassion and beating myself up for all the things I wasn't getting done wasn't moving the needle at all. I was just going, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I was quitting on a lot of things. And I realized, I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing. I'm beating myself up rather than seeing what's actually truly going on, which was I didn't have enough time to be doing all the things I wanted to do. So now I time block, and I have, I work full time, and then outside of that, I have other things that I do. And I have FigureFit. I'm a beauty counter manager. I do, I consult women with safer, cleaner beauty. And so that all takes time. So I give myself slots to fit that in. And for example, right now with FigureFit, I'm working on a webinar, and it has to do with the bad habits, breaking bad habits. And this webinar, it's taking me a long time. And I'm crazy because I thought, I'll do it in a day. Like, that's what we do. We create a schedule, and we're like, I'll create this webinar with all these slides in a day. And that's so unrealistic. So I'm now just giving myself more time and grace to do the things that I say I want to do.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's just key.
I was thinking too, what you said earlier about the self-talk and, the stories we tell ourselves in the shower and all that sort of stuff. You don't want to know Steve's story.
Oh, jeez. Don't go there.
But I was just thinking, for someone that's busy, they're things they're doing anyway. I think part of it is also changing that perception. So, for example, if you're making someone aware that they're actually spending a lot of time creating the problem, and then they understand those stories, they pull themselves up, they change that. That doesn't take any extra time. You're still going to be sharing the same. So I think we can fit some of these tips straight into a lifestyle, even without having to change anything in your day-to-day activity. Those small changes could make a massive impact, because, darkness only exists in the absence of light. In any moment, if there's a void, it potentially could be filled up with darkness. If we actually make the effort to fill up that void with light and love and that sort of stuff, then that darkness can't exist. So I think if we basically have a look at a lot of our current actions and again, have a look around the world at the moment, in the absence of light and love, then darkness will prevail. So it's a big mission for us globally to be trying to educate and enlighten people on things. But internally, we've got to do that as well. We've got to realize that when we're not actually working towards filling up a void with light, then darkness will be there. And that could be bad habits, that could be the time travels, the negative stories and all that sort of stuff. So having some of those things that we can go to force our brain and change our perception, I think is important. Like for Steve, I was going to ask you, You don't say you'd meditate, would you? You're not that type of dude, are you?
I don't, but I play guitar.
He plays guitars and you run, and you do that stupid running for
running thing.
hours and days, thinking that something's still going to be chasing him after hours.
Just in case.
I don't know why anyone would think they need to be able to be an endurance runner.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Animals would quit.
But it's funny, when I tell people that swimming and running is like meditation, they kind of go, no, it's just hard and hurts. But do you agree with me? Is it sort of
is.
It is?
Yep. Mm-hmm. It totally is. You're entering that same period of focused concentration. And that's all meditation is. So let's back it up to the beginning of your first question about meditation. Meditation is the stilling of your mind. It is. And it's not a guided visualization. That's visualization. That's not meditation. The goal of meditation is to create space in between your thoughts. And it takes time. You might, I always recommend when I first work with people on meditation is start off with 5 minutes a day, but commit to it. And just the only thing you're going to focus on is your breathing.
Yep.
And every time a thought comes in, I want you to think about the thought like it's a cloud in a clear blue sky, and then all of a sudden there's a cloud there. You can focus on the cloud, or you can focus on the clear blue sky. I want you to focus on the clear blue sky, just return to your breath. The thought will disappear. And for sometimes people are like, oh, but it's thought after thought after thought after thought. Well, that's the process of meditation. It's the awareness that you're building of those intrusive thoughts that are constantly running through your mind, because eventually your mind will slow down. You will have space in between your thoughts, and you will enter a more still state of mind. And then every time you do that, that part of your brain is getting strengthened, and you're building neurological connections in that new state of your mind. And that's actually called the experiencing mind. The other one is the evaluating mind, which is the default brain. But this one, you have to build it. It's like you got to sit with it and build it every day. And then once you start doing that for, gosh, I don't know how long it was before I really started learning about my mind. I was doing my makeup one day, and I was in the middle of a story and blah, 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 blah. I was on and on. It was like some sort of argument that was going on with me and my ex, and, just chatter. Nothing was even real. It was all in there, all being made up. And I had already been meditating for probably about 12 weeks at that time. And I literally stopped and I went, I looked at myself in the mirror. I go, you're delusional right now. Like, you're creating this. And it was like my first awareness of, holy smokes, this doesn't mean anything unless I give it meaning, unless I buy into that story, or I can completely disassociate from that, like it's a cloud in the sky.
I do have a question about that, though, because what if I am replaying that scenario in my mind, and this time I think of that really cool thing to say, or I actually I actually win that argument this time, because that's what happens to me. That kind of like reenacting something that someone said, oh no, I should have said this, and I was so cool in those moments when I reenact it in my brain and I win those arguments and I say the witty things. Does that kind of change it to be making me cool again, or is I still just a dork at the time?
Trust me, I don't think it ever goes away.
That's funny. It's funny because you mentioned the meditation and taking your brain on the state. One thing weird I used to do, I haven't even told you this, but when I ran my own business, when the brain was really, I was really stressed, let's face it, because I was a shit businessman. I didn't do what you did and go to a business school. I just fumbled along. And I would have a pen and paper at the end of the pool. And if I had a thought while I was swimming, I would get out and write it down, because that's when I'd have these thoughts. And I went, what? I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that this was some sort of special, people call it cross-crawling or other sorts of things. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that when I swam, I could think a lot more clearly and get things articulated. And I'd come up with some of my best ideas, semi-naked, writing with a wet pen and a wet bit of paper. It was weird.
You just made it.
You know
weird.
what?
Yeah, it was just. I mean, you get out of the pool and there's a pen there and you're dripping all over it and you have to write like that.
It's the semi-naked bit. I don't think you needed to add that bit. You
I
made it weird.
probably didn't have to add that in, but everyone swims semi-naked.
Well, the
don't
weird
they?
thing is he doesn't wear pants. He wears a singlet. That's what I'm sitting there thinking.
All right,
That's strange.
Naked then, just swim naked. No, she's got a comment on that. That's terrible. But you know what I mean? Like you get the best ideas when you, in my case, swim or meditate. It's incredible, isn't it?
You're on to something, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so I told you I'm super spiritual. Like, my education with yoga, like the yoga studies kind of end at meditation. They actually end at what's called samadhi, which is, okay, here's the path of yoga in a quick nutshell. First of all, you have yamas and niyamas. Those are like how you eat, how you take care of yourself. And then before that is like how you take care of other people, how you are interacting in the world. Okay, so this is the first two parts of the path of yoga. The third one is actually the poses. The fourth one is the breathing. And then it goes into concentration, which is actually the withdrawal of your senses. And then it goes into concentration and literally focusing. And then it goes into meditation. And then after meditation, it goes into samadhi, which is like union with the divine. Okay. So all of those things create the path of yoga, and they're all things that you have to do. Okay. So you don't get to meditation unless you have aligned your habits, your way of being, the way you treat people, the way you treat yourself, your physical nature, your concentration, your breathing, your withdrawing from the world and all of the ideas that you're latching onto out there, to even focus on what this thing is doing, to meditate, to become one with the divine. Okay. So some people say if you can't just meditate without aligning the body first, and that's where the poses come in. Okay. Because that helps. Yeah. Like it's the alignment of your mind and body. That's the first thing we talked about. So when you do that, it aligns you, and then you're in that place of receptivity where you can receive things out of the blue. They're like, oh my gosh, I needed that. That's, Einstein. You got your insight. Like you're out in the daytime or in prayer or just yelling, like whatever the case may be, you're speaking what you need into existence in life into that. But you're not going to receive it by beating the problem. You're going to receive it when you go swimming or when you go for a run or when you detach from it and you go align your body, mind, and soul, and you get into that state of receptivity. That's when you're going to receive those answers. Or when you're playing.
Yeah.
That's a huge one that a lot of people miss out on. We don't do that as adults, Play is huge.
Yeah. That's why I never grow up. I think it's much better. I think if you get to my age and you haven't had to be an adult, you don't ever have to be.
You're always trying to avoid adulthood at all.
I definitely got to play more. Oh my gosh, I'm kind of boring.
Well, there was that saying, I don't play because I'm old. And it's like, no, you're old because you don't play.
Yeah.
Like it's so important. And even too, like the silliest things, like recently I've done some rehabilitation work for injuries and that sort of stuff, which focusing a lot on symmetry and that. But in between that, I'm encouraged just to play, just to bounce around, be silly, get the legs. So for example, we do very structured hamstring sort of an adductor work, but then it's just swing your legs around like you're a kid just sitting on a fence. And that feeling, it takes you straight back to that moment where when you just sit there with your legs hanging and just swinging them around, kicking them like that, you actually feel like you were when you were a kid on a swing or something. And totally changes everything. Our posture and that sort of stuff can really hold on to a lot of memories and can really hold on to a lot of patterns. I think it's so important to not just have everything structured and organised and have moments of just freedom and silliness where you can just play. Again, it's handy when you got, I got my young children, my boys are 5 and 6, and just now going out and playing in the yard with them, they make you into a kid again. It's actually that the posture and that playing and getting up and down off the ground and running around like a silly person and doing the stupid dancing and that sort of stuff, like that's so important for your body to remember that you're not stuck into a structured, rigid routine, that you still have that ability to be flexible and pliable and, like a flock of birds. You're not thinking about it when you're doing that, but your body's capable of doing stupid stuff, without breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That is so good. I think that like the less you move, the more stiff you become. So moving is just so good for the body.
And funny thing is, the gyms have just opened. I've just gone back to the gyms. Now, I used to go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, up to 6 times a week to manage my injuries. Now, interesting, I've taken all this time off the gym. I went back, they're all gone. I just realised I think I was actually reinforcing a lot of these things. I was getting into this. I must have been like training a certain posture, and like I was so determined to fix these injuries. I think I was like, with the angst, I'm like, all right, you're going to be the best shoulder in the world. And then I had a bit of break, and all of a sudden things are like loose and free, and I can move. So I think that was a good thing.
Amazing. It's funny because playing is vitally important. And also, I noticed on your website you value hard work as well too. And you got this fantastic quote that I love from Thomas Jefferson, number 3. You've
been really stalking a bit, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, well, I went, we've got to research.
Research.
Research. And look at this, I'm flicking on the button.
Good job.
Yeah, and you got this great quote. I love it. It says, I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it. Thomas Jefferson, probably 1801 to 1809 he was, I guess, president. Your president's better than I do, I guess. But it's an amazing quote.
I don't know, but I like that quote.
Yeah, it is amazing because, people sort of seem to have more luck the better they work at it. Like you get better at golf if you work harder at it, all those sorts of things. I just love that quote because it does bring us back to saying, well, we've really got to, also work at our life and get ourselves in a better position. So I love that.
Yeah. I closed my yoga studio back in 2018. And when I did that, I didn't realize like how much my identity was tied to that. And at the same time, I lost a really good friend. And so two hits, like right in the same time frame, it was like 2 losses. And I went into depression for the very first time in my entire life. And I didn't really know. I knew that I was depressed because I was crying every day, literally every day. And I knew that I was experiencing depression. So I was like, I know that I can't drink because that just compounds your depression. I was working out, but barely, just doing what I could. And what I realized is that I was so grateful that I had my successes in the past to look back upon, and the path of hard work that I took prior to get me to where I was before, because I just felt so disconnected from who I was, and it was like forming a whole new identity. And what I learned during that time was when you're in that space, a lot of the things we talked about in terms of bad habits are just kind of like circling you because you have a hard time getting out and really motivating yourself to even do anything. And those motivations are like little blips on a radar. They come and go so quickly. But I remember thinking, I have this trail that I can look back at that I did before, and I can do this again. I know what I have to do. I have to show up. I have to show up and do the work, whether I want to or not. And it was just a slow process of showing up, not showing up, showing up, and then like finally, it's like these layers started to fall off me. I started to feel like myself again. I started showing up in the world again. But for a good year, I was just like a cocoon, like leave me alone. I'm trying to heal. I'm trying to find who I am again. And it wasn't even like there were just parts of me lost. I did lose somebody, and I lost that part of my identity that was tied to that yoga studio. And so, those are losses. And once I really gave myself permission to grieve those losses, it helped. But on the point of hard work, I mean, truly, you just have to keep showing up. That's why we're here. You know, life isn't going to be easy all the time, and we're going to have things that happen that hurt us, and people are going to die, and we're going to lose people, and unfortunately that happens. And so what is the outcome? You know, for me, it's made me softer, I think, than I was in the past. But there's that famous phrase of, I just posted this on Instagram the other day. It was about the wolf. There's a young man and his grandpa, and he's talking about the wolf of anger and then the wolf of love. And the young boy says, well, which one wins? And the grandpa says, the one you feed is the one that wins.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it's so true. And, you know, it goes along with what you were saying about the light and the dark. Like, we have to choose. We have to choose us. We have to choose self-love. We have to choose hard work. We have to choose those things.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, too, you gave a story about that time that you had to go in and heal. And you mentioned a cocoon, and my brain went straight to the analogy of coming out as a butterfly, as opposed to if you'd pushed through. So if you went through that period of darkness, you had that angst, you had that depression, but you did continue to turn up and go through the motions with all that negative self-talk, you may not have thrived at all. You may have been barely survived. I mean, taking that time. So it's very important for people out there to realise that there are times where you do have to stop, put yourself in a cocoon and heal. And in those opportunities, you get a chance to stop, break some patterns, you know, change your belief systems, change your outlook on life, and then come out better for it, turn back up. And it is totally okay to turn up as a different person. Like, it is okay to learn and grow and be new. You don't have to, you're allowed to change your ideas, you're allowed to change your beliefs and change your concepts. And many times, if you don't, then you're never going to grow. So I think that's an important part. And there are times where we've got to turn up, and there are times we've got to push through, but there are also times where we've got to be honest with ourselves, take a step back, protect ourselves and heal, and build a more of a solid foundation to work from. Some other smart dude has made a quote about practice makes permanent. You know, where perfect practice makes perfect. So if you're doing the same wrong thing all the time and you're doing it with the wrong frame of mind, but you're doing it with intensity, you could just be reinforcing a bad pattern. So sometimes, again, having that ability to stop, self-reflect, go, there's a problem here, we'll reassess and we'll try again on a different strategy. I think people need to acknowledge that, because it's a bit confusing sometimes. Like, do I turn up, push through, force a result, or do I go, you know, this is a bad path, it's not right, I need to take a step back and reassess and see where I really truly need to go. And I think, again, understanding the difference between your habits, which habits are good and which habits are bad, I think it all links in perfectly. And I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of insights out of your books, all of your books actually, by the sounds of things, because we're going to need to have a good understanding of, yeah, the cycle of life and how we can chop and change. You know, even just like I was at the start, you said weights and sprinter through to yoga. I'm going, wow, that's amazing. There's so many other little aspects like that where you have that ability to totally reinvent yourself and come out better for it. You're still the same person. You still got the same soul and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's okay to change and actually what you thought was right at one stage, go through and go, well, maybe right for some, not right for me, I'm going to change. You know, so, and then focus on the positive. So I think, again, with habits, it's important to understand that you can be a different person, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
So true.
I love that. I love that. I do have, if you want me to go through it, I do have the 5 steps to create a new habit.
Oy,
let's do it.
Let's do it
because I think,
okay.
Yeah, I'm dying to know. I got some changes to make here.
Yeah.
So the breaking, once again, was here's the 3 steps. Recognize the process that unfolds for you. So start by catching yourself in that process. And then even what happened before you engaged in the habit. Step 2 is, what did the impulse feel like? Like, did you feel a burning in your stomach? Like, was it anger? Was it somebody made you feel small? And, you know, like somebody say something to you that made you is an old trigger. Okay. So there's a feeling attached to that. So what did it feel like? But then what was the trigger? So what was the initial trigger that made you turn to the habit? Was it something somebody said? Was it something that you saw? So those are the three steps to break the habits. And then creating a new habit, there's 5 steps. And the first one is, first of all, knowing what you want. So what is your big goal? And then what are your reasons? Like, why do you want that? You really have to attach that why. And I don't know if you've ever heard of, it's Dean Graziosi. I think he went to a therapist, and the therapist was like, well, why do you want that? And he was like, well, I want to, have freedom. And he's like, yeah, but why? And he was like, well, then I won't have to worry about bills. And he's like, yeah, but why? And he was like, I think it's a better lifestyle. And he's like, yeah, but why? And he's like, well, because when I was a kid, my parents worked all the time and nobody was really around. He's like, now we're getting somewhere, but why? And he's like, I guess I don't want my kids to go through that. And he's like, why? He's like, because I didn't feel loved as a kid because my parents were always working. It's like it dug deeper. So like really got to hit that why. Why do you want that? What is the big goal? And then this is the most important part of this one. What is the process you are willing to live in order to get you to that goal? Like, what are you willing to do? Are you willing, like for me, the goal of being on stage and showing my rear end, what was I willing to do? Well, I was willing to do some squats, to diet,
anything,
split lunges that I hate. What are you willing to do?
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You got to find out that thing. And then number 3 is, what behavioral commitment can you put into place to help you create this habit? And what that looks like is, for example, knowing this is part of this, like knowing the obstacles. I will blank when blank happens. So I will put my gym bag in my car so that when I get out of work, I'm going straight to the gym. Okay, that's an example. So what is the behavioral commitment you're willing to do? So let's say somebody wants to quit smoking. Well, I don't know. I've never smoked. So, or maybe you just want to drink more water. I will put 5 glasses of water throughout my house every morning. I'll take 5 minutes to do that. Just something like that. It's something that you're committing to start reinforcing that habit. And that's called the reticular activating system. You see it, and then you're like, oh yeah, I wanted to do that. Because if it's literally out of sight, it's out of mind. So what are you willing to do? And then number 4 is visualize your success. And the thing here, you've probably heard of this, is that the brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So like every time we tell the story of that person we're arguing with, the brain thinks it's really happening. You're creating the same chemicals inside your body. You're really just like keeping that state alive. So if the brain doesn't know the difference between a negative situation or a positive situation, then you got to like really use your brain for the positive and start visualizing yourself successful in this goal, or successful doing the behaviors that will get you to the goal, because you're going to pour into 1 or 2 scenarios. Which one are you going to pour into? And then the last one, number 5, is imagine the obstacles. So what are the things that can get in your way? If you're a parent, it could be, just random things with the kids that get in the way. It could be, for example, when I used to go to my brother's house, they were not paleo like I am. They still ate the standard American diet, and I grew up on that. So for me to see a Pop-Tart or to see Doritos or Oreos, I was like, yes. But the new me was like, no, that's awful. And your gut does not like it. Like, not my belly fat gut, like my digestive system, it does not like it. It caused issues for me. I had allergies, I had digestive issues. So I had to imagine going to, for example, a cookout where there's all sorts of food that I don't normally have at my house. I used to binge at that because and that was an obstacle for me because I like that food. I just can't have it. And so if I'm around it, I'm like, yes, cheat day. But no. So you have to imagine the obstacle, and you have to imagine yourself overcoming it, not being tempted into it. And so you literally have to see yourself being victorious over the obstacle.
Yeah, wow.
Those are the 5 steps.
That's amazing. That's such a powerful thing there, because the whole, you know, where you're saying the brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. And then everyone's always talked about imagination creating a reality. I mean, that is such a powerful thing. And again, it goes back to that darkness in the absence of light. Like, I mean, if you're imagining anything, let's imagine really awesome stuff. And then that becomes your reality. You spend enough time imagining awesome stuff and your brain believes it, then your reality's pretty damn awesome. Like that's free. And it doesn't take that much time, and it's something that we can all do. You got to believe it. You got to really get into it, though, huh? You can't have that self-talk, and you can't do that imaginary thing and then go, "Oh, you're an idiot using your imagination like that." You know, because then you you know, you're so right. It's so okay. That's one of the reasons why you should meditate, because you're building that other part of the brain that is self-aware. But what you just said is more, it's gold, because you can create. Yeah.
And if you think about our brain, the default is to complain. That's our default. That's easy for us to do. So what's not easy is to imagine greatness and to imagine all the best things that we can. It's just not natural to us. But if we can make that more natural, then our outcomes are going to be different as well.
Absolutely.
I had that thought yesterday, because I can think, you know, we all have these just weird things that pop into our heads. And especially with the world that's happening now, you can think of all these different scenarios. And I remember a thought popped into my head yesterday, and I wake up and I meditate. And lately I have been visualizing. I'll write a goal, and then I'll visualize what I want to see or what I want to feel. And it's deliberate, because if I don't do this, like, I have to make myself, but I want to do this because I know the power in it. And so that's my first hour of my day is this creative time. And I remember in my workout yesterday, I had this weird negative thought come in, and I go, what the heck? And I said this, I'm like, what the heck? How come it's so easy to think that, but it's so hard for me to go into like the greatness? And I was like, the other ones, they just come in so easy. And I'm like, you have to kill them, and you have to like switch them over. And that conviction behind it might not be there. You know what I mean? Like the feeling. But I don't know, like it's the tying of the feeling to the thought that is the creative power. That's the creative power.
And Liz, I mean, you're a public figure. You've got these books. You're well known, and podcasts and stuff like that. You're not in a position yourself that, you know, for the brand to be out there complaining about stuff to other people. Do you find yourself then, in the absence of that ability, then doing a lot of that self-talk? When you're going to complain, you complain to yourself about yourself, and you know what I mean? Like, because none of us want to seem like a whinger. Or that's an Australian term, I'm not sure. None of us want to seem like a complainer and a sook or anyone like that. We want to be we want people to perceive us as strong and bulletproof and not that sort of stuff. So I think for a lot of people that don't have that support network around them to dump some stuff on, we spend 10 times the amount of time doing it internally. And that sounds like it's more damaging. Might be more damaging for us to try to sort these complaints out in our own mind than it would be just to kind of dump it on to a professional or a loved one.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, though. Like, how do you feel when you vent or when you speak that stuff? Like, how do you feel?
Mainly victim. A victim
I don't
of circumstance.
Feel good. Like it's like it's heavy, and I get hot. I've associated it with anger. Like when I get angry, I don't really like myself. It's not that you can't be angry. Like, anger is natural and sometimes it's perfectly justified. But we've all been angry and then regretted it, you know? So like the feeling is the same for me when I'm complaining. So I try to not, I try to just like go through my head, and really I do have a strong faith. So I'll pray and I'll literally talk to God. I'm like, this is making me mad and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say all these things and I out it and I get it off my chest so that I put it up to a higher power. And, you know, whether you believe in that or not, I've had so many things that like happen because I've done that. I'll say this, and I need this. And like the next day it happens. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've had those convictions of that works, that like venting to a higher power rather than to a person, because people are human. They want to help, but sometimes they just can't, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to. I don't know if you had any more, Steve, but I would like you to
ticked
wrap
off
up.
all my questions.
Yeah,
really, you've been great. It's been wonderful. I just want a very quick final one, and I know we're running out of time, but you describe yourself on your website, and I love this, as a consciousness and inner peace researcher, best-selling author, and leadership consultant. The first part, consciousness and inner peace researcher. I love that. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
Inner peace.
Yeah. Did I prove to be true to that on this podcast today?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good fun. Oh man, I could talk about this stuff for ages because we're all on journeys and that sort of stuff. But we've had some amazing guests that have been absolute experts and specialists in their field. And when we come on, it's all starting to link together. Everything is starting to, like, for any listeners out there, after listening to this episode, go back, listen to the ones with Dr. Don Wood, listen to the ones with Ken Ware, and then listen to pretty much any of the other podcasts when we had any guests that's achieved anything. And you'll actually see a lot of these same patterns going through the process. And the people call it different things, you know, but you'll see the same theme that's coming through with not just successful people, but people that are, in my version of success, it would be happiness. Someone with happiness and time is the most successful person I know, and health, of course. So I'm absolutely loving this journey. It's not just changing a lot of people out there, but we're all changing. We're all totally growing for the better through this process, and I really, really appreciate it. Did you want to give us a quick show us the books and tell us where to find you? Because I know we're going to have listeners that are going to go through and go, I need to do more of this. So can you tell us?
Here it is.
Yeah, the book's Happy, Healthy, Fit.
Yep, I love it.
And it's available on Amazon. I do have it available on Audible as well.
Oh yeah,
in audio version.
That's my style.
And I'm Liz Nierzwicki, and you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. And I also have my fitness company, FigureFit, and that's on Facebook and Instagram as well.
That's excellent.
And your website.
We'll link all this sort of stuff. So I actually have no idea what happens after we do this. But we end up with this amazing podcast that just somehow we fluke it every time, which is just perfect. I don't think they do any editing. So we have these beautiful podcasts and then blogs and all the links and stuff that we do through our stuff and things. And an adult will come in and sort all that out. So
God bless them. Good for them.
I know, the little elves that come through at night. So thank you so much for your time. I really loved it. I reckon we'll probably do more in the future because I'm going to just start implementing some of these things and then come up with a whole heap more stupid questions that I should just have the light there filling up that void, but mine will fill up with questions for a bit first. And I'm really excited about everything coming forward because you know what I'm saying? Hey, Steve, like you've seen this pattern that we're going through.
It's a very similar pattern.
It's this beautiful pattern that's coming through. And that panel that you were on at that Lake Tahoe, we actually recorded that and have that available as well through our stuff and things, whatever that might be. That was how amazing were those sort of things where you can get just everyone on that panel is totally different expertise. Just the synergy that's coming through. And that's what we're seeing through a lot of our information and podcasts lately, and I just love it. I think it's fantastic.
It's been a pleasure. I mean, I've learned so much. So thank you for giving up your evening, our morning.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I really appreciate you having me on today, and I appreciate the time connecting with both of you. Really, thank you so much.
No problem.
That's it. We'll do it again.
Well, have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
You too.
We got to do, so how do we say this? How do we, okay.
Sign off.
I'm going to sign off. So, yeah, thanks from us and them, and good work, Liz. That'll do.
Thanks, Liz.